Let me know what opening we should play. We see knight c3. Interesting. It's kind of hard to reply to that with a specific opening. I think I'll just play what I think is one of the best moves against knight c3, which is d5. And we'll see what he does. d4. Okay, so this could turn into maybe like a Jobava London for white. That's quite possible here. It could also turn into a Scandinavian with, sorry, not Scandinavian, a Carl Khan with e4. Let's say if I played c6, right? For those wondering, no, this is not a Petrov. No, that is not the case. Yeah, I think after this, I mean, c6 is reasonable, but he doesn't have to play this. Then I think we would see bishop there. So I'm just gonna go knight f6, and you know, maybe we'll play a little bit of this. Curious what he's gonna do after this. If there's one thing I know for sure, it's that I do not expect a 600 to be able to play knight c3 in front of the pawn and make it look good. There's one thing that you usually don't want to do, and it's d5 and knight c6. And I say usually, because you pretty much want that pawn on c3. That's what you want. Or on c4. But blocking your own pawn is not a good feeling. Not at all. This already doesn't give me a good feeling for white's position. I think either the pawn should be there, or the pawn should be on c4, or the knight should just not be out on c3. Just leave the knight there, because you want to play e3, c4, maybe knight d2, c4. You need something. Here, I'm stopping white from playing e4 with my pieces. White's stopping himself from playing c4 with his own knight. And so white doesn't really have any push. There's nothing happening for white. There's no queen b3 because the pawn's on c4, putting pressure on b7 and d5. There's no pressure on d5. There's no open c file down the line. So I'm sitting here wondering, what is white really going to be doing in this game? Because I see no breaks happening. And that's why you just don't usually put a knight in front of your pawns like this. e3. Well, e6. I think I'm on the better end of this because I got my bishop out and then played e6. He played e3 with his bishop on c1. So I'm going to have the much better looking position. Both my bishops enjoy nice diagonals here. Whereas for him, that bishop is already crying on c1. Bishop b5, another rather wasteful move, and instead of playing knight c6, we're just going to repel that bishop with tempo. c6. My knight wants to go here, much the same. I think his knight should have gone there. Or he should play c4 and then knight c3. Why do you think the queen's gambit goes d4, d5, c4? You don't play knight c3, you go c4, and then you go knight c3. You need to have your knight behind your pawn. Why do you think in the French, the advanced, when the pawn was on e5 and I played c5 and then knight c6? It's because if I played knight c6 first, I would be threatening nothing. I would have nothing active. I'm going to play bishop d6. Of course, we're very interested in this. Takes, takes. But bishop d6, probably where my bishop wants to go regardless. Knight to d7. And castling. If I trade the bishop, I just think my opponent's happy to take it back and then maybe push the pawn. Something like that. Let's develop our knight. We're taking control of that square now. All our pieces seem to be on pretty good squares. Again, if he takes, we're always taking back. I'd be very happy to do that. And you guys might find this move funny. You might laugh at this guy, but I will be the first one to say that if he's doing what I think he's doing with this move, I'm actually legitimately proud of him. I think this is a very good move. The hardest thing to do in chess is admit that you were wrong about putting your knight on a certain square. He is literally putting the knight back to the starting square because he realizes he's doing absolutely nothing with the knight on c3. He needs to move his pawn. He needs to reroute that knight to a better square. That looks maybe like the stupidest move you could ever see. I'll be the first to give him credit. I think it's a fantastic move. It's not going to slow us down, though. We've got all our pieces where we want. We're getting castled. We're approaching the middle game where now we're really going to decide how we want to play going forward. Where do we want to put our pieces? What's our plan going to be? That sort of stuff. I have a few more pieces to develop to basic squares, but that's about it. A4. Okay. This is where I start to not like what he's doing. He's playing this move, and I can't think of a reason why. Based on his last move, I'm wondering if he wants to play knight a3, and I think maybe he does. But guess what? Knight a3, you're going nowhere. That's why these pawns are so strong here. Okay? So now I start to think to myself, okay, but he's not really doing anything too threatening here. I'm still a little bit resistant to bishop takes bishop. The pawn could take back, and then he gets e4. You know, after knight c3, I don't love that. So I don't want to take this. I don't mind knight e4, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, rook e8's a decent move. Queen e7, queen c7. Which of those moves do I want to do? Because those are the only ones that are really on my mind here. I think I'm going to choose to bring my queen out this way. Sometimes queen b8 is a better move than queen c7, just because queen c7, if he plays c4, you know, when c5 happens, I want to be able to keep my bishop on that diagonal by moving backwards. So sometimes queen b8. I know that feels weird, like why would I block in my own rook? But believe me, queen b8 is actually sometimes quite a reasonable move. Hits that pawn, knight e4 happens next, and we just have really good pressure on this diagonal. So I'm thinking about those two moves. Queen e7 has the idea maybe to take and then play e5. And then everybody takes and we get our queen out there. Beautiful. So these are the 3 queen moves I'm thinking. And I'm not in a rush to play rook here because I think there are a lot of positions where I might get a knight in, maybe play f5, and really the rook might be useful on f8. So I'm not in a rush to move that rook. Even though this is a very decent move, I want to leave it here. It's possible this other rook can just go there instead. Right? And unfortunately, I can't really break in the center with e5 because my bishop's under attack. So this pawn needs to stay here for now. I don't want to take because of the pawn taking, and I can't push because the pawn needs to stay there. So it's kind of a catch-22. So my moves are between these 3. I like this one the least, and these are 2 very different plans. Queen b8, maybe for this, better control the center. Queen e7, it's not really threatening e5, which is why I don't love it, but it's kind of pointed in the right direction, and overall I think it's a stronger, more sensible move. But if I'm being honest, queen b8 might have worked better against what I expect he's trying to do. Okay. Now, this move I was actually a little bit hopeful for, and it's the move that I ultimately decided to myself, I'm okay with queen e7. So I'm going to take this. Might not be the best move. Knight e4 is a fantastic move, but taking here just leads to a position which opens up perfectly for the exact reason why I wanted to play this. The whole plan is like, I want this bishop gone somewhere so I can finally play e5. Why do I not want that bishop on f5? It was hanging the entire time. Now I've been talking about how pawn takes and maybe my opponent can get e4 in, but I'm going to make sure to be the one to play e5 before that. Queen takes d3 makes so much sense. But now I play e5. Now I'm threatening to go e4 to fork the queen and the knight. My opponent only has 2 pieces defended, or developed rather. And if they're not paying attention to the e-pawn, it's going to arrive on e4, which is exactly what's going to happen right now. My opponent's going to lose a piece. Now, if they took the pawn, I would take back, the knight would take, my queen would take, and because my opponent played b3, I would be hitting the rook in the corner, and I would be threatening checkmate on h2. So white was in already an extremely difficult position here. Even if they took, I would take back. And at that point, you're in big trouble. If you move the queen, well, I trade the knight, and then I put my queen on e5. I'm hitting your rook, I'm threatening mate. So you're going to lose something. So whether he took with the pawn, the knight, didn't matter. The reason b3 was so bad was you were going to lose something. Now, my opponent basically didn't react to e5. Might have actually saved himself from an early checkmate, but obviously is blundering here with the move e4. So after bishop there, do we want to take? Do we want to push? Trying to decide here. If I take, I think there's actually a world where like maybe he could take here. Takes, 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 takes. And I don't really want to entertain that. So let's just keep it really simple. We know that e4 is going to win a piece with a fork. Let's not bother with bishop takes a3. No need, because remember, if the bishop takes here, I'm going to take back. And then this fork is still going to be present. Like it's always going to be there. Okay, so now I am interested in taking. Now I've got this whenever I want. So I am interested in taking because I see his knight going this way as a good thing for him. That's towards the center. Of course it's a good square. I see his knight going that way as very, very bad for him. So I want to force the knight to go there. Now I'll take my piece that I earned. The rook is tied to the knight. My knight will now enter the center of the board. I'm threatening knight d2, which will win the exchange. If he brings his rook to guard that square, or brings it into the middle, he's going to lose his knight. And it's very easy to forget that. So we're up a piece. We're threatening this knight with the queen, which means it's tying that rook down. Easy to forget. We're also now threatening knight d2 to win more material. And the knight on a3 can't move anywhere. None of those squares are great. He played the best move. Very impressed with rook d1. Absolutely the best move. Developing another piece, guarding that square, leaving the rook there, guarding a3. Wow. Very, very good move. In the current position, I think we're just going to continue going forward. I'm going to play f5. This rook is going to swing over to e8. The knight does not look remarkable on that square. f5 immediately looks to open things up in the next couple moves. Maybe even lift the rook. But yeah, rook e8, f5. Just bring all the pieces to the e file and the f file. I think that's where all the action is going to be. Rook's tied down. Knight to b1 may be played because he just realizes the knight's not very good. But you know what the story of this game has been? It's actually been that knight. He moved it to c3. It sucked there. He moved it back. Now it's on a3 where it's actually even worse. So you might have to move it back again. And this knight has just cost, 4 or 5 moves, 4 or 5 tempi. It's a liability. Rook to e8. Maybe go for this pawn push eventually, like queen d6 and support it. Rook f6. All right, so he's played queen f4. Unfortunately for him, I think it's quite possible that move does not help. Because it almost encourages the next couple moves, right? Like g5, f4, for example. The one thing this move does is it maybe intends to go to c7, and I could see that being a little bit annoying, honestly. Do I think there's a very, very high chance that knight c3 wins the queen? Yeah, I do, honestly. Knight c3, you know, if rook d3, knight e2 forks the king and queen. Knight c3, rook e1 is fantastic for white. So, you know, it's not, knight c3 is not an unbelievable move for me, but I can definitely see it working. Knight c3 also stops the c-pawn from moving, so it's not the worst move on the board. Rook e8 is the type of move that I would play if I'm just, you know, if I'm just looking to play a decent move. I think rook a to e8 is pretty good. So rook a to e8 is like probably the best safe move. Knight c3 has a very high chance of knight e2 working, in my opinion. But the other reason I like knight c3 is it blocks the c-pawn. If I'm guessing white's next aggressive move, I'm thinking either f3 to hit the knight or c4 to actually maybe, you know, get some pressure going, maybe open a file. That's how I would expect white to continue the game. So I actually like knight c3 because it stops c4. And the fact that it comes with an added threat is even better. So hopefully he goes rook e1, and he does. Great move. Now I'm going to continue with this move, and I'm going to leave the knight there just in the way, honestly. So rook e8. Credit to him spotting so far every knight fork. Knight d2, covered. Knight c3, covered. So he's definitely spotting all these game-ending knight forks. But I'm still happy to have my knight there because he doesn't have any way to advance these pawns now. Knight b1 might be the best move, but am I ever going to complain about a trade? I got a full extra knight. Yeah. And objectively, by the way, this is the best move. So again, I think he's played a good one. I am going to take it though. No need to get fancy here. Trade, we have a full extra knight, and that's going to be, should be more than enough here. All right. Yes, the knight can go to f6, queen f5, but there's knight e4, which would be quite good for us. But maybe we have even better than that. I'm definitely thinking about g5 here. I think g5 is a pretty good one. If the queen goes to g3, there's even f4. If the queen goes to c7, I have knight f6. So I like g5. I just feel knight f6, f3. I don't have a lot of moves there. So g5, I'm up a full knight. I can definitely be a little riskier with my pawns. I'd like to play f4. Oh, that's very interesting. There is someone in chat named Jend5136. Well, that's very funny. Hello, Jend. He's in chat. That explains why he was seeing all these knight moves. I was like, damn. He's not that good, is he? No wonder he was seeing all my knight forks. That makes a bit more sense now. He's been following the channel since 2 hours ago. 2 hours. And he got a gifted sub from Gregory, of course. Gregory gifted him a sub. And what do you know? As soon as he leaves the stream, he blunders. Queen f5. Now my knight gets in and the f2 pawn falls. Well, that was quick. He didn't last very long on his own. Okay, queen to h3. A number of different ways we could take stuff here, but I like taking with the knight because it definitely seems like it threatens the most. However, taking with the rook and doubling and maybe tripling with the queen, that does feel like ultimately the better move. So the knight comes with tempo. The rook is probably the best move. Let's think here. Knight takes. Queen h5 is probably the best move. And then what's my plan to win? It's probably bringing the knight back and then invading. So I think let's keep it simple and take with the rook. Triple up here. I was gonna say that was just really impressive. Every single knight fork he was covering. It's like, how do you blunder a piece and then treat your own knights like trash the entire game, but then somehow you seem to understand my knights so well, where they want to go. You don't even understand your own knights. It's like, wow, it's a remarkable skill my opponent has. Bring the pieces in. I think it may be time. Rook to f8 as well. I'm starting with the queen because if he takes, let's say my rook was here instead of the queen, I would have to take back with the rook, but it does make more sense to lead with the queen. So let's take check. The king only has one square, that's for sure. And at this point, I think rook f8 in order to, make some threats here is kind of the way to go. This one also comes to mind. Knight to d2. Maybe to play like rook takes e3. So yeah, I'm definitely thinking about that. But rook f8 does come with an immediate threat. It's just I do expect this. We have to move our king somewhere. And then might have to deal with one or two more checks. Again, we'd have to move our king. I'm trying to find a way that gets things done in maybe a nicer way than that. But I'm not sure that that exists. So I'm just going to go for it. I think this is nice and simple. Here we go here. Here. I'll go there. And if we get checked again, I'll probably choose to block. Yeah, so that move makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Gives the king an escape square, stops that. Overall, very good move. Check. The queen will have to go there, and yeah, I think my opponent's more or less covering things. So we'll check. No matter what white does, I think our next move is this. It's kind of given up on this idea. no matter what, we'll probably take this, and then that will, you know, make way for other pieces to join. We'll take this with a check. The king only has 2 squares. This one may be the worst of the two, although I'm not sure because rook f2 was probably forced mate after king g2, so maybe he actually picked the better one. King there, and I will give a queen check here first because this one gets mated in a rather attractive way. So this one is the better move for sure. I think it's time to take the queen. I'm entertaining, of course, a lot of other knight moves, but I just don't think they get the job done. Now it's check. Now it's check again. And then this one will be a mate. Oh! You wouldn't really do that, would you? You guys wouldn't really do that, would you? Of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. Hello, Jend. Good game, buddy. Jend, I noticed you were a little less capable at spotting all my knight forks after you left the stream. Knight fork really came back to bite you there. I also noticed that your first move out of the stream was queen takes f5. Well, that one wasn't very good either. I hope you enjoyed the game. I can only suspect in this position that the reason that you played knight to b1 was that you may have heard me talk about the fact that your knight absolutely doesn't belong on that square. And so you decided to move it back. Now, as I was the first person to give you credit for this very, in my opinion, impressive knight move, because it's the toughest thing to do in chess, is to admit your mistake. As I was the first person to give you credit, I will also be the first person to take it back. But it doesn't change the fact that knight b1 is a fantastic move. It is. Now, why am I hyping this move up so much? The knight just shouldn't be there to begin with. It really shouldn't. So the fact that white played this, whether or not he heard me say it first, I never actually said play this move, did I? I never actually said play it. So the fact is, even if he may have heard my thoughts about how the knight doesn't belong there, for him to actually move it back, I still think is a great sign. Right? That's still, you know, a lot of that was Jend. If you're going to play like a 2 knights kind of opening and you play d4, never put the knight in front of the pawn. You need to play an opening like this. And instead of playing that, you need to play your pawn here. And then your knight out. But if you're not comfortable playing a gambit like this, maybe start with something like e3. That doesn't feel great because you're blocking your bishop. Well, then you might say, oh, let me get my bishop out and then play e3. And then play c4. And then play knight c3. And then every single one of your pieces are happy. Bishop's happy getting out. Bishop's defending c4 before you play it. Knight's on c3 after the c-pawn moves. That's how you make everyone happy. or play the Queen's Gambit. Great opening. But this is not good. There are many things in chess that you just have to be at a high level to play. Right? Naroditsky, Bortnik, they play this move all the time. It can be a fantastic move. Do I recommend this for anyone under 1500? No. No. Certainly not anyone under 1000. This is not a good opening to start out with. It breaks a lot of fundamental rules, and it takes a strong player to understand why you can get away with this. And a very specific system as well. You can't just play this and, you know, play this and suddenly make it work because you're strong. No, you need to play like very specifically. So knight c3 as a starting move, I already don't like. I just don't think it's a good first move. Should probably change that to a pawn move immediately. And then you just realize that, wait a minute, you have no breaks, no e4, no c4. What are you going to do for the rest of the game? Right? What are you going to do for the rest of the game? There's not a lot of active plans. Is the point knight c3 to push e4? You could say that, but then you may as well push e4, right? You absolutely need to. You need to castle, play queen e2, play rook e1. Your whole game plan should be e4. But if I'm playing against you, I'm probably going to put my knight there and not let you do that. Hello to Dill. Hello to Big Dill.